Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. In this video, we're taking a calm journey into one of history's most haunting chapters, the Salem Witch Trials of 1692. What began as strange fits in a cold Massachusetts winter grew into a wave of fear that touched nearly every home in Salem Village. We'll walk through the quiet streets, peer into dim candlelit rooms, and listen to the whispers that change lives forever. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the story wash over you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's begin. You wake slowly in the pre-dawn darkness of late February, 1692. The room around you is cold, bitterly cold, and your breath makes small clouds in the air. Outside your small window, Salem Village lies silent under a blanket of snow that fell during the night. The wooden walls of your house creak softly as the wind pushes against them, a sound you've grown so accustomed to that you barely notice it anymore. You pull the wool blanket tighter around your shoulders and listen. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, signaling the approach of morning. It's time to begin another day. You swing your legs out of bed and your feet touch the cold wooden floor. The shock of it wakes you fully. You reach for your clothes, simple, practical garments in dark colors, and dress quickly in the dim light. There's no fire in the hearth yet. That will be your first task. As you move through the small house, you can hear the stirring of others in nearby homes. Salem Village is waking up, as it does every morning, with the same rhythms and routines that have governed life here for decades. The fire takes a few minutes to catch. You kneel before the hearth, arranging kindling and blowing gently on the first sparks. When the flames finally take hold, their warmth begins to push back against the cold. You hold your hands near the fire for a moment, feeling the life return to your fingers. This is how every morning begins in winter, with cold, with fire, with a slow return of warmth and light. It's a simple thing, but it grounds you. It reminds you that life continues, day after day, in its familiar patterns. As the room brightens with firelight, you begin your morning routine. There's water to fetch from the well, though in this cold you hope it hasn't frozen over completely. There's bread from yesterday that needs to be warmed by the fire. There are animals to tend to. A few chickens in a small coop, perhaps a cow if you're fortunate enough to own one. These tasks fill the early hours of every day. They're the foundation of life here, the quiet work that keeps a household running. You step outside, and the cold hits you immediately. The sky is beginning to lighten in the east, turning from black to deep blue. Snow covers everything: the road, the fences, the bare branches of the trees. Your breath comes out in thick white puffs. You make your way to the well, your boots crunching in the snow, and you're relieved to find that the water, though cold enough to make your hands ache, hasn't frozen solid. You draw up a bucket and carry it back inside, moving carefully so you don't spill any on the icy ground. Back inside, you warm the bread and eat slowly, thinking about the day ahead. There's work to be done, as there always is. If you're a farmer, and most people in Salem Village are, you'll need to check on your livestock and repair anything that's been damaged by the winter weather. If you're a woman, you'll have spinning to do, or mending, or the endless task of preparing meals with the limited supplies that remain this late in the winter. February is a hard month. The harvest is long past, and spring feels impossibly far away. You make do with what you have. Salem Village in 1692 is a small place, really just a collection of farms and houses spread out over a few miles. It's not like Salem Town, the more prosperous port community a few miles to the east. The village is poorer, more rural, more isolated. Most people here are farmers, working land that can be stubborn and unforgiving. Life is hard, but it's the only life you've known. The community is tight-knit, bound together by shared religion and shared struggle. Everyone knows everyone else. There are no secrets in a place this small, or at least, that's what you've always believed. The village has been through difficult times lately. There have been disputes over land, arguments about the church and its minister, tensions between families that go back years. The Putnam family and the Porter family, for instance, have been at odds for as long as you can remember. They disagree about practically everything: where the church should be located, who should serve as minister, how the village should be governed. These divisions run deep, creating invisible lines that split the community. You've learned to navigate these tensions carefully, trying not to take sides, trying to maintain peace with your neighbors, even when they're feuding with each other. As morning fully arrives, you begin to notice something different in the air. It's subtle at first, just a feeling. You pass a neighbor on the road, and they nod to you. But their face seems tense, worried. You hear voices from another house, raised in what sounds like argument or distress. When you reach the village center, really just a meeting house and a few other buildings clustered together, you see a small group of people talking in low, urgent voices. You slow your pace, curious. You've heard rumors over the past few weeks, strange whispers about the minister's daughter and her cousin. They say the girls have been acting oddly, falling into fits, screaming out, contorting their bodies in ways that seem impossible. At first, you dismissed these stories as exaggeration. Children get sick, especially in winter. They have fevers and nightmares. It's not unusual, but the rumors have persisted, growing stranger and more disturbing with each retelling. People are beginning to talk about witchcraft. The word itself makes you uncomfortable. Witchcraft is real, of course. The Bible speaks of it, and the ministers preach against it. Everyone knows about the witches in Europe, the trials and executions that have taken place there. Cotton Mather, one of Boston's most prominent ministers, has written extensively about witchcraft. His book, Memorable Providences, describes cases of possession and diabolic influence. It's required reading for anyone who wants to understand the devil's work in the world. But here, in Salem Village, the idea that there could be witches among you, in this small farming community where everyone knows everyone else, seems almost impossible to believe. You approach the group near the meeting house, and someone notices you. They call you over, and suddenly you're part of the conversation. They tell you about Betty Paris, Reverend Samuel Paris's 9-year-old daughter, and Abigail Williams, his 11-year-old niece. The girls have been suffering from strange afflictions for weeks now. They scream and throw things. They dive under furniture and contort their bodies into unnatural positions. They complain of being pinched and pricked by invisible hands. Sometimes they bark like dogs or make sounds that seem inhuman. Dr. William Griggs has examined the girls multiple times. He's looked for fever, for rashes, for any physical sign of illness. He's found nothing. The girls appear healthy in every measurable way, yet their suffering is undeniable. And now, this is the part that makes everyone's voice drop to a whisper. Dr. Griggs has suggested that the cause might be supernatural. He's told Reverend Paris that he suspects the girls are under an evil hand. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the February cold. The people around you are frightened. You can see it in their eyes. Salem Village has always been a place of order, of predictable routines and familiar faces. The church provides structure and meaning. The seasons dictate the rhythm of work. Everyone knows their place and their role. But now, something has entered that order. Something that can't be explained by the usual logic of daily life. And when people can't explain something, when the familiar categories of understanding break down, they look for someone to blame. The conversation continues around you. Someone mentions that the girls have been spending time in the kitchen with Tituba, Reverend Paris's slave woman from Barbados. Perhaps she's been telling them stories, filling their heads with dangerous ideas from her homeland. Someone else suggests that there's been too much talk of the devil lately, too much focus on sin and damnation in Reverend Paris's sermons. Maybe it's affecting the young ones, making them susceptible to dark influences. But these explanations feel inadequate. They don't account for the violence of the girls' fits, the sheer strangeness of their behavior, the way multiple girls are now showing similar symptoms. You excuse yourself and continue on your way, but the conversation stays with you. As you go about your tasks for the rest of the morning, checking on animals, mending a fence, carrying firewood, you find your mind returning to those two girls, writhing and screaming in their beds. You think about their families, about how frightening it must be to watch your child or niece suffering and not be able to help them. You think about the doctor's diagnosis, an evil hand, and what that means for the village. If the devil is at work in Salem, then everyone is in danger. By midday, you've finished your most urgent work, and you find yourself walking toward the parsonage, drawn by curiosity and concern. When you arrive, you find you're not the only one. Several other villagers have gathered outside, talking in hushed tones. No one wants to intrude on the family's privacy, but no one wants to leave either. There's a sense that something important is happening, that this moment will be remembered. The door opens, and Reverend Paris emerges. He looks older than you remember, his face drawn and pale with worry. He's a man in his late 30s, originally from Boston. And he's never quite fit in with the rural farming community of Salem Village. There have been disputes about his salary, about firewood for the parsonage, about his ownership of the church building itself. Some people think he's too focused on his own comfort and not enough on his congregation's spiritual needs. But right now, seeing the anguish on his face, you feel only sympathy for him. His daughter is suffering, his household is in turmoil, and his entire congregation is watching, waiting to see what he'll do. He speaks briefly to the gathered crowd, thanking them for their concern, but asking them to respect his family's privacy during this difficult time. His voice is steady, but you can hear the strain beneath it. This is a man under tremendous pressure. He's supposed to be a spiritual leader, someone who can explain God's will and guide his flock through difficult times. But his own child is afflicted, and he has no answers. The irony is cruel. You return home as the afternoon begins to fade. The winter sun, never very strong to begin with, is already sinking toward the horizon. You restart the fire, prepare a simple meal of bread and salted meat, and sit by the hearth as darkness falls. Outside, the village grows quiet again. Lights appear in windows as other families gather around their own fires. From a distance, Salem Village looks peaceful, unchanged. But you know that something has shifted. The comfortable certainty of daily life has been disturbed by something that resists easy explanation. In the days that follow, the situation grows worse instead of better. Betty and Abigail's fits continue, becoming more frequent and more violent. They thrash and scream. They speak in strange voices. They claim invisible beings are tormenting them. And now, other girls are beginning to show similar symptoms. Ann Putnam, who is 12 years old, starts having fits. So does Elizabeth Hubbard, who is 17, and Mary Walcott, 16, and Mercy Lewis, 19. It's as if whatever afflicts Betty and Abigail is spreading, moving from house to house like a sickness. You hear more about these developments in fragments, bits of conversation overheard at the well or on the road or at church. The ministers from surrounding towns have been called in to pray over the girls and offer advice. The community holds days of fasting and prayer, everyone gathering at the meeting house to beg God for relief from whatever evil has invaded their midst. But nothing helps. If anything, the fits are getting worse. The girls scream about being pinched, bitten, and pricked. They claim invisible forces are choking them. They say they see specters, ghostly forms of the witches who are tormenting them. And now, at the urging of some of the villagers, the girls are being pressed to name their tormentors. Who is afflicting you? Who is causing the suffering? At first, the girls are reluctant or perhaps unable to identify the witches. But gradually, under sustained questioning from concerned adults, they begin to speak names. The first name they speak is Tituba. This doesn't surprise many people. She's from Barbados. She's different. She's already viewed with some suspicion because of her foreign origins and her practice of what some consider strange customs. She's known to tell fortunes by dropping egg whites in water and interpreting the shapes. Some of the girls may have participated in these fortune-telling sessions, which would have been considered dangerous dabbling in the occult. Tituba is vulnerable, powerless, an easy first target. The second name is Sarah Good. She's a beggar woman who wanders the village asking for handouts, and she's not popular. She's poor, dirty, sharp-tongued when refused charity. She mutters under her breath when people turn her away, and those mutters can sound like curses. Her husband is a laborer who can barely support the family. They've been living in other people's barns and outbuildings, unable to maintain a home of their own. Sarah Good exists at the very margins of village society, already partially cast out before the accusation ever comes. The third name is Sarah Osborne. She's an elderly woman, probably in her late 60s or early 70s, and she hasn't been to church in over a year. This absence from worship makes her suspect in the eyes of the community. She's also been involved in a scandalous situation. She lived with her farmhand before marrying him, and there's been a bitter legal dispute with her sons over property. Like Sarah Good, she's someone who's already outside the bounds of perfect respectability. These three women, Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne, are the village's most marginal members. They're the ones who already exist at the edges of society, who have already violated community norms in various ways. It makes a certain kind of terrible sense that they would be accused first. If there are witches in Salem, surely they would be found among the outcasts and the strange, not among the respectable church-going families who form the core of village life. On the 29th of February, 1692, it's a leap year. Warrants are issued for the arrest of all three women. The news spreads through the village like wildfire. You hear about it from a neighbor who heard it from someone at the meeting house. Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne are going to be examined by the magistrates. Salem Village is going to have its first witchcraft examination You're not sure how to feel about this development. Part of you is relieved. If these women truly are witches, then arresting them will end the girls' torment. The village will be safe again. Order will be restored. The children will recover and life will return to normal. But another part of you feels uneasy. You've seen Sarah Good around the village for years. Yes, she's poor and she can be bitter. But does that make her a witch? Is poverty and a sharp tongue really evidence of trafficking with the devil? And Sarah Osborne. She's old and sick and she hasn't attended church, but again, is that really proof of witchcraft? Or is it just proof that she's elderly and infirm? The examinations are scheduled to take place on the 1st of March at Ingersoll's Tavern. But so many people want to attend that the location is changed to the meeting house, which can hold more spectators. It seems like the entire village plans to be there, along with people from Salem town and surrounding communities. Everyone wants to witness this moment, to see the accused witches confronted with the evidence against them. On the morning of March 1st, you join the crowd making its way to the meeting house. The day is cold and overcast, the sky a uniform gray. You walk alongside your neighbors, and the mood is tense, expectant. People speak in low voices, speculating about what will happen. Will the accused women confess? Will they maintain their innocence? Will the afflicted girls be able to identify them with certainty? Inside the meeting house, the crowd packs in tightly. People stand shoulder to shoulder, pressing forward to get a better view. The air quickly becomes thick with body heat and tension. You find a spot where you can see reasonably well, and you wait. The magistrates, John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin, sit at a table at the front of the room. They're stern-looking men in their 50s, dressed in dark clothes, their faces set in serious expressions. These are men used to authority, accustomed to being obeyed. They represent not just village leadership, but colonial law itself. The afflicted girls are also present, sitting together in a group near the front. You can see Betty Paris, Abigail Williams, Ann Putnam, and the others. They look pale and frightened, but there's also something else in their demeanor, a kind of alertness, as if they're waiting for something specific to happen. They watch the door intently, anticipating the arrival of the accused. Sarah Good is brought in first by the constable. She's a small woman, maybe 38 years old, worn down by poverty and hardship. She's holding her baby, just a few months old, and she looks around the room with angry, defiant eyes. She knows she's hated here. She knows most of these people have refused her charity, have turned her away from their doors. Now they've accused her of witchcraft, and she faces them with barely concealed contempt. Magistrate Hathorne begins the questioning. His approach is not neutral. From the first words, it's clear he assumes guilt and is trying to extract a confession. Sarah Good, what evil spirit have you familiarity with? He asks. None, she replies. But before she can say more, the afflicted girls begin to cry out. They point at Sarah Good and scream that her specter, her spirit form, is tormenting them right now, even as she stands before the magistrates. They writhe in their seats, clutching at their throats as if being choked by invisible hands. You watch this spectacle with a growing sense of unreality. The girls are clearly in distress. Their suffering is visible and genuine. But is Sarah Good really causing it? How can she be tormenting them when she's standing right there, in full view of everyone, holding her baby? The concept of spectral evidence. The idea that a witch's spirit can leave her body and attack others while her physical form remains elsewhere. is difficult to grasp. But the magistrates seem to accept it without question. If the girls say they see Sarah Good's specter attacking them, then that's evidence of her guilt. The examination continues. Hathorne asks Good what she mutters when she goes away from people's houses. She says it's the Bible verses, Psalms. He asks if she made a contract with the devil. She denies it vehemently. But with every denial, the girls cry out more loudly. They're becoming more agitated, more violent in their fits. At one point, several of them fall to the floor, thrashing and moaning. The crowd gasps and murmurs. Some people look genuinely frightened. Others watch with fascination, perhaps even a certain satisfaction at seeing this unpopular woman finally getting her due. Sarah Osborne is examined next. She's brought in leaning heavily on a walking stick, clearly unwell. She's been sick for months, which is partly why she hasn't attended church. She denies the accusations against her, insisting she's more likely to be bewitched than to be a witch herself. But again, the afflicted girls cry out, claiming her specter is pinching and choking them. Their fits become so severe that the magistrates have to pause the examination several times. Then comes Tituba, and this is when everything changes. Up to this point, both accused women have maintained their innocence, denying any involvement with witchcraft. But Tituba, perhaps understanding that continued denial will do her no good, perhaps under pressure from her master, Reverend Paris, perhaps genuinely confused about what's being asked of her, does something unexpected. She confesses. The room goes completely silent as Tituba begins to speak. She describes the devil appearing to her, showing himself as a tall man from Boston dressed in black. She says he asked her to sign his book and serve him. She talks about seeing other witches flying through the night to attend meetings. She describes a creature, sometimes a hog, sometimes a great black dog, that commanded her to hurt the children. She gives the magistrates and the crowd exactly what they want to hear. Confirmation that witchcraft is real, that it's active in Salem, and that there's a conspiracy of witches working together. You feel a chill run down your spine as you listen to Tituba's confession. Part of you recognizes that this testimony is problematic. Tituba is enslaved, powerless, vulnerable to pressure and coercion. She has every reason to tell the magistrates what they want to hear if she thinks it might save her life. But another part of you, the part that's been raised to believe in the reality of the devil and his servants, finds her testimony deeply disturbing. If what she's saying is true, then Salem is in terrible danger. If there really are multiple witches working together, then the 3 women standing accused today are just the beginning. The examinations conclude with Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne committed to jail in Boston to await trial. Tituba, as a confessed witch who's cooperating with the authorities, is also jailed but treated somewhat differently. The afflicted girls seem calmer after the examinations, at least for the moment. Many people in the village feel that a corner has been turned, that the crisis will now resolve itself. The witches have been identified and arrested. Justice is being done. But as you walk home that evening, stepping carefully over the icy patches on the road, you feel deeply troubled. You've witnessed something today that you don't fully understand. You've seen your neighbors accuse other neighbors of impossible crimes based on spectral evidence that can't be verified or disproven. You've seen the power that fear can have over a community, how quickly people can turn against those who are different or disliked. And you've heard Tituba's confession, which suggests that this is not the end, but only the beginning. That there are more witches hiding in Salem, waiting to be uncovered. That night, you lie in bed, listening to the wind outside your window. Sleep doesn't come easily. You think about Sarah Good's defiant eyes, Sarah Osborne's frail body, Tituba's frightening testimony. You think about the afflicted girls and their violent fits. Most of all, you think about what comes next. If there really is a conspiracy of witches in Salem, then more accusations will follow. More examinations, more arrests. The crisis that seemed to be resolving itself today might actually be just beginning to unfold. Before I continue, I want to give you a quick reminder. If you're enjoying this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get back to where we left off. March arrives, and with it comes a slight warming of the air, though winter still has its grip on Salem Village. The snow begins to melt in patches, leaving the roads muddy and difficult to travel. You watch as brown earth appears through the white, and you think about spring planting. Soon, it will be time to prepare the fields, to turn the soil and sow the seeds that will become this year's harvest. But it's hard to think about the future when the present feels so uncertain, so charged with fear and suspicion. The afflicted girls don't stop having fits after the first examinations. If anything, their torments increase in frequency and violence. And they begin to name more names. This is what you feared. What kept you awake that night after the first examinations. The accusations are spreading. On March 11th, Martha Corey is accused. This sends a shock through the village that's even greater than the first accusations. Martha Corey is not a marginal figure like Sarah Good or Sarah Osborne. She's a respectable church member, a woman who attends services regularly and is known for her piety. Her husband, Giles Corey, is a prosperous farmer in his 80s, one of the oldest and most established members of the community. If Martha Corey can be accused, then no one is safe. You hear the news from a neighbor who seems genuinely shaken. They've cried out against Martha Corey, she tells you, her voice trembling. Martha Corey, can you believe it? You can't, not really. You've seen Martha at church countless times. She's always seemed devout, serious about her faith. What could have prompted the girls to accuse her? The details emerge gradually. Apparently, Martha Corey made the mistake of expressing skepticism about the girls' afflictions. She suggested that perhaps they were not truly bewitched, that their fits might have natural causes, or might even be fabricated. This skepticism, rather than being seen as reasonable doubt, was interpreted as evidence of guilt. Why would Martha Corey question the girl's testimony unless she herself was a witch trying to cast doubt on the proceedings? You see how the logic works, and it chills you. To express doubt about the accusations is to make yourself suspect. To question whether these girls are truly afflicted by witchcraft is to suggest that you might be one of the witches tormenting them. The trials have created a situation where silence is the only safe response. Speak out, and you risk being accused. The trap is perfect and inescapable. Martha Corey's examination takes place on March 21st at the meeting house. Once again, you're part of the crowd that gathers to witness it. The atmosphere is different this time. With Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, there was a sense that justice was being done, that the village was rooting out its unwanted elements. But with Martha Corey, people seem more uncertain, more troubled. You can see it in their faces, hear it in the way they speak to each other before the examination begins. When Martha Corey is brought in, she maintains her composure. She's a woman in her 60s, gray-haired, plainly dressed. She stands before the magistrates with dignity, denying all charges against her. But when Hathorn begins his questioning, the afflicted girls immediately fall into fits. They cry out that Martha Corey's specter is tormenting them. They mimic her movements. When she bites her lip, they cry out that they're being bitten. When she shifts her weight, they cry out that they're being pinched. It's as if they're connected to her by invisible strings, their bodies responding to her every movement. The spectacle is disturbing in a different way than the first examinations. With Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, it was easy for many people to believe in their guilt. They were already outsiders, already suspect. But Martha Corey is one of their own, a regular churchgoer, a woman who seemed to embody Puritan values. If she can be a witch, then the devil's influence runs deeper than anyone imagined. The community you thought you knew is revealed to be penetrated by evil at its very core. 4 days later, on March 24th, another shocking accusation emerges. Rebecca Nurse is cried out against. Rebecca Nurse is even more respected than Martha Corey. She's in her 70s, a matriarch of a large and prominent family, known throughout the community for her piety and kindness. She's been ill recently, hard of hearing, somewhat frail. The idea that she could be a witch seems absurd to many people. You're working in your field when you hear this news, trying to prepare the ground for planting despite the lingering cold. A neighbor runs past, calling out the information. They've accused Rebecca Nurse. Can you believe it? Rebecca Nurse. You straighten up, your hands muddy from the soil, and feel something inside you shift. If Rebecca Nurse can be accused, then truly no one is safe. The accusations have moved beyond the village's margins, into its very heart. That evening, you join a group of neighbors who have gathered to discuss this latest development. The conversation is cautious, guarded. People are beginning to understand the danger of speaking too freely. But in low voices, away from the afflicted girls and their families, doubts are expressed. How can Rebecca Nurse be a witch? She's been a faithful church member for decades. She's raised 8 children, been a midwife to many women in the community, tended to the sick and dying. Her whole life has been one of service and devotion. What evidence could there possibly be against her? But evidence, you're beginning to understand, is not required in the usual sense. The afflicted girls say they see Rebecca Nurse's specter. They say it's tormenting them. And in the logic of these trials, spectral evidence is sufficient. There's no way to disprove it. No way to demonstrate that you're not sending your spirit out to harm others. If the afflicted girls say they see your specter, then you're guilty. The burden of proof has been reversed. Instead of the accusers needing to prove guilt, the accused need to prove innocence. And innocence cannot be proven. Rebecca Nurse's examination takes place on March 24th. You don't attend this one. You can't bear to see another of these spectacles. But you hear about it from those who do. They say Rebecca Nurse conducted herself with remarkable grace and dignity. She spoke quietly. Remember, she's quite deaf. And maintained her innocence throughout. But the afflicted girls had their fits, crying out against her. The magistrates, particularly Hathorn, pressed her hard with questions. At one point, they even brought in other accused witches to confront her, trying to get one of them to testify against her. She was committed to jail to await trial. The arrests multiply as March turns to April. More girls come forward with accusations, more women, and it's mostly women, though some men are also accused, are arrested and examined. The jails begin to fill with accused witches. Some are people from Salem Village, others from Salem Town or nearby communities. The fear that started in one small farming village is spreading outward, infecting the broader region. You try to maintain your daily routines, but everything feels different now. When you go to church on Sundays, you look around at the congregation and wonder who will be accused next. When you speak with neighbors, you're careful about what you say, aware that any expression of doubt could make you suspect. The easy familiarity that once characterized village life has been replaced by caution and fear. One Sunday in April, Reverend Paris preaches about the devil's work in Salem. He speaks of how Satan has infiltrated the community, how he's working through witches to destroy God's church. He calls on everyone to be vigilant, to watch for signs of witchcraft, to report any suspicious behavior. The sermon feels less like spiritual guidance and more like an incitement to suspicion. When you leave the meeting house that day, you feel exhausted and troubled. The legal machinery of the witch trials is becoming more formalized. In late May, the newly arrived governor, William Phipps, establishes a special court of oyer interminer, a court specifically created to hear and determine the witchcraft cases. The judges include Lieutenant Governor William Stoughton, who will serve as Chief Justice, along with several other prominent men from the colony. These trials will be held in Salem town, with all the authority and formality of the colonial legal system behind them. This development makes everything feel more real, more official. These aren't just village disputes anymore. This is the law, the full weight of colonial authority brought to bear on the question of witchcraft in Salem. The accused aren't just being examined by local magistrates. They're going to be tried by judges appointed by the governor. They face the death penalty if convicted. The first trial takes place on June 2nd. Bridget Bishop is the defendant. She's a woman from Salem town who runs a tavern, and she's been accused of witchcraft before, years ago, though nothing came of it then. She has a reputation for being outspoken and somewhat unconventional. She's been married 3 times. She dresses in bright colors rather than the somber tones preferred by the Puritans. She allows games like shuffleboard in her tavern. These things don't make her a witch, but they do make her suspect in the eyes of the community. The trial is swift. Spectral evidence is admitted. The afflicted girls testify that they've seen Bridget Bishop's specter tormenting them. Other witnesses come forward with stories of strange occurrences they attribute to her witchcraft. Some speak of quarrels they had with Bishop years ago, followed by misfortunes they interpret as curses. A couple of men testify that they found poppets, small dolls with pins stuck in them, in the walls of Bishop's house when they were doing renovation work. These poppets are presented as evidence that Bishop practiced malefic magic. Bishop maintains her innocence throughout, but it does no good. The jury finds her guilty of witchcraft. Chief Justice Stoughton sentences her to death by hanging. The execution is scheduled for June 10th. When you hear this news, you feel physically sick. An execution. They're actually going to execute someone for witchcraft. Part of you has been hoping, perhaps naively, that the trials would eventually fizzle out, that cooler heads would prevail, that someone in authority would recognize the madness of what's happening. But instead, the trials are accelerating. The colonial government has given them its official sanction. And now, a woman is going to die. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop is taken to Gallows Hill and hanged. You don't attend the execution. You can't bring yourself to witness it. But you hear about it from those who do. They say a large crowd gathered, drawn by curiosity or by a belief that justice was being served. They say Bishop maintained her innocence to the end, protesting that she knew nothing of witchcraft. They say she died bravely without making a scene. And then they cut her body down and buried her in a shallow grave on the hillside. A woman is dead now. Bridget Bishop, who ran a tavern and wore bright clothes and played shuffleboard, has been executed by the colony of Massachusetts for the crime of witchcraft. This is no longer a matter of accusations and examinations and jail cells. People are dying now. The witch hunt has claimed its first victim, and everyone knows it won't be the last. In the days following Bishop's execution, there's a strange quiet in Salem Village. It's as if the community is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. Some people seem satisfied that justice has been done, that a witch has been punished, and the afflicted girls will now recover. But others are deeply troubled. The execution has made everything more real, more consequential. Lives are at stake now, not just reputations. You spend your days working in the fields. The weather has finally warmed, and the planting season is in full swing. You turn the soil, plant the seeds, tend to the young shoots as they emerge. This physical work is grounding, a reminder that life continues even in the midst of crisis. The earth doesn't care about witch trials. Seeds grow according to their nature. Rain falls when it falls, sun shines when it shines. There's something comforting in these natural rhythms, these processes that continue regardless of human fears and conflicts. But even as you work, your mind keeps returning to the trials. More people are being accused. The jails are full. Trials are scheduled. It's becoming clear that Bridget Bishop's execution was not an isolated event, but the beginning of a wave of executions. The Court of Oyer and Terminer is proceeding with its work, hearing case after case, and the verdicts are almost always guilty. On June 28th, 5 more people are tried and convicted. Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Good, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Howe, and Sarah Wilds. Their executions are scheduled for July 19th. When you hear that Rebecca Nurse has been convicted, you feel something break inside you. Rebecca Nurse, the pious old woman who's been a pillar of the community for decades. If she can be convicted of witchcraft, then the trials have lost all connection to reason or justice. You learn the details of Rebecca Nurse's trial from various sources. The afflicted girls testified against her, of course, claiming her specter tormented them. But there was also testimony in her favor. 39 prominent citizens signed a petition attesting to her good character. The jury actually found her not guilty at first. There was a moment when it seemed like reason might prevail, when the obvious innocence of this elderly, devout woman might override the spectral evidence against her. But then, Chief Justice Stoughton intervened. He expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict and sent the jury back to reconsider. Under this pressure, the jury changed their verdict to guilty. Rebecca Nurse was sentenced to death. Later, she was briefly reprieved by Governor Phipps, but the afflicted girls had such severe fits upon hearing of the reprieve that he reversed his decision. Rebecca Nurse would hang after all. The story fills you with despair. If even a not guilty verdict can be overturned, if even the governor's reprieve can be reversed, then there's no hope for any of the accused. The trials have taken on a momentum of their own. They've become a machine that grinds forward regardless of evidence or reason, consuming anyone who falls into its path. July 19th arrives, hot and humid. It's a Tuesday. You stay home, unable to bear the thought of witnessing the executions. But later, You hear the details from neighbors who did attend. 5 women were hanged that day on Gallows Hill. Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Good, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Howe, and Sarah Wilds. Rebecca Nurse was excommunicated from the church just before her execution. A final cruelty inflicted on a woman who had been a faithful member for so long. Sarah Good cursed Reverend Noyes from the gallows, telling him he was a liar and that God would give him blood to drink. The others protested their innocence to the end. 5 women dead in one day. 5 bodies cut down from the gallows and buried in shallow graves. 5 families torn apart by grief and horror. The scope of what's happening is becoming clearer. This isn't just a few isolated cases. This is a wave of executions, a purge of alleged witches that's sweeping through the community. Good night. Don't forget to subscribe if you liked the video.